My mother turned my graduation party into my sister's big night, so I took the microphone and ruined everything. My name is Stephanie Allen. I was born and raised in a quiet suburb of Oregon. Seen from the outside, my family looked like the perfect portrait of the American middle class, a house with a front yard full of lavender, a spotless white fence, and family dinners under warm light. But on the inside, things were far from as pleasant as they seemed. I was the firstborn of my parents, Mark and Linda Allen, both fervent advocates of modern parenting. My father, a software engineer passionate about mathematics, had always dreamed of having a brilliant and exceptional daughter. My mother once told her friends that she had read more than 40 books on child psychology before I was born. I came into this world surrounded by high expectations, and I was monitored, measured, and analyzed like a research project. However, when I turned 3 and still couldn't count to 20 or write my name properly, my mother's disappointment became obvious. "Mark," she said with a mix of frustration and caution, "I think she isn't able to learn as fast as we hoped. We need to intervene soon before we miss that golden stage." My father just nodded, but I remember the way he looked at me that day, like I was a math problem that had given the wrong answer and, therefore, wasn't worth solving anymore. When I was 4, my younger sister Claire was born, and from that moment on, everything at home changed. My mother seemed to become a different person. Every corner of the house was filled with brain-stimulating toys, cards to teach emotions, and advanced learning tools that you'd only find in elite educational centers. I clearly remember one afternoon, I was sitting quietly, building with Lego blocks in a corner of the living room when my mother passed by, looked at me, and sighed. Claire is only 7 months old, and she already responds to 3-step sequences. Well, keep playing. Claire had a musical high chair, imported cloth books from Sweden, and even a private Montessori tutor before she turned 2. And I had printed exercise booklets, a tiny pencil, and daily reminders that I needed to try harder if I wanted to achieve anything. At 8 years old, I won 2nd place in a school art contest. I came home with my painting, overflowing with excitement. My mother looked at it and said, well, Claire read an entire story in English today. My father said nothing. He was busy installing a logical challenge board for Claire in the basement. I learned not to expect anything, not praise, not rewards, not looks of pride. Little by little, I became a shadow in my own family, present, but never truly seen. The breaking point came in the fall of the year I turned 12. I had always had my own room, the one upstairs with a window that looked out onto the small forest behind the house, where morning light came in soft beams. I loved that room. It was the only place where I could feel like myself. One night, just after finishing my homework and hanging a new drawing on the wall, Claire burst into the room. "Mom says I'm moving up here. This room is bigger, and I need space for my new study corner." I looked at her, thinking it was a joke. I answered firmly, "This is my room." Claire shrugged and walked out. Less than 24 hours later, when I got back from school, everything had changed. My things had been moved to the smaller room next to the laundry room. The old room now had Claire's name on the door, filled with new study equipment and a spotless white desk. I walked into the new room, tiny, narrow, and cold. The bed touched the wall. The desk was so small that my books and a lamp couldn't fit at the same time. I stayed there with clenched fists, holding back tears. "Mom," I called. "Why did you do this? That room was mine. I've had it since I was a little girl." She didn't even turn around to respond. "You're older now. You have to learn to make room. Claire needs it more. Don't make a scene, Stephanie." I didn't answer. I went back, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. The hallway light filtered through the crack under the pale, unfamiliar door. For the first time, I felt with absolute clarity that in that house, I was merely a footnote, despite being the eldest. By the time I reached my senior year of high school, life in the Allen household still revolved around Claire. She studied at a prestigious private school, rode in a brand new SUV, and had private lessons twice a week. And I was still in public school. I walked to class every day and took care of everything on my own, from studies to extracurricular activities. I never complained. I was already used to staying out of the spotlight. But I wasn't prepared for the moment when any illusion of fairness would be completely shattered at the dinner table. That night, my grandparents, Arthur and Helen, came to visit. They were the only ones in the family who made me feel seen and heard. We were eating Mom's lasagna, and Claire talked about her plans for a summer program at Stanford. "That's wonderful," Grandma Helen smiled, then turned to me. "And you, Stephanie, have you thought about college yet?" I looked up for the first time, excited to share something of my own. I applied to the University of Oregon and to UC Davis. I just got accepted into Oregon's business program with a partial scholarship. If I get more financial aid, then, I didn't get to finish, because my mother set her fork and knife down on the plate with a sharp sound. "Stephanie," she said with a tense voice, "your father and I talked, and we can't help you with tuition this year." I blinked in disbelief. "What?" My father stepped in, as if they had rehearsed it. "We have to prioritize Claire. She was invited to a preparatory Ivy League program. It's a very rare opportunity." My heart sank. "So all the college savings that were supposedly for both of us, will go to Claire?" My mother sighed, as if it were obvious. "Claire has real potential, Stephanie. You should maybe consider starting at a community college. Transferring or working for a while isn't a bad idea." "It's not a bad idea." It took me a moment to realize they were completely cutting me out. The room went silent. No one spoke, except for the sound of Grandma Helen's spoon clinking against her plate. "Linda," she said, her voice low but firm, "they're both my granddaughters. I can't just sit here and watch you discard one of them." My mother pursed her lips. "Mom, this isn't." "Yes, it is," Grandpa Arthur interrupted. "Of course it's our business." That night, while I was washing dishes in the kitchen, Grandma Helen came up and gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to carry this burden," she said. "We'll pay for your college. All of it. No loans." I turned around, my eyes wet. "But that's a lot of money." "It's not too much when it's an investment in someone who works hard," she smiled warmly. "You don't need favoritism to shine, Stephanie. You already do it on your own." That fall, I moved into the dorms at the University of Oregon. The day I left home, my mother gave me a half-hearted hug at the door and said, "Be frugal, and don't expect anything from us." Claire didn't even look up from her phone. I crossed the yard dragging my suitcase, feeling like a new door was opening in my life, one without judgmental looks, descendants, or bitter comparisons. College was another world. There, I was no longer just an average girl or the shadow behind a so-called genius. I was Stephanie Allen, business student, with a sharp mind and an unbreakable spirit. The professors praised my strategic thinking. My friends came to me for help with their assignments. And every weekend, I called my grandparents to tell them about every little step forward I made. My parents never called, not even to ask how I was doing. And strangely, that didn't bother me. I no longer needed that. I had stopped seeking validation from a place that had never offered it freely. What I had now was real value, one that came from within. I entered my final year of the business program with a certainty I had never dared to imagine, thanks to nights of studying in the library, part-time shifts at a little downtown cafe where I learned how consumers really think, and hours upon hours spent reviewing every investment model I could find online. I started to stand out. One of my finance professors, Dr. Elgin, recommended me for a highly competitive summer internship at a prestigious investment firm in Seattle, Bradley and Lane Capital. I remember the first interview, a glass conference room, a polished oak table, and 3 managers sitting across from me, each holding my resume. "Alan," one of them asked, "what do you think is the most important factor in creating an investment strategy?" "Understanding not just the data but the psychology behind it," I replied. They looked at each other and nodded. I got the offer. And from that summer on, everything changed. After graduating with honors and publishing a research project in a financial journal, I was offered a full-time position at Bradley and Lane, as a junior investment analyst. I worked tirelessly, learning everything from risk reports and shareholder presentations to how to read between the lines on volatile market charts. 3 years later, during a routine review of a high-net-worth client's portfolio, I discovered something troubling. A group of tech stocks in which the firm had invested heavily was showing signs of artificial growth. The internal indicators seemed exceptionally high compared to the rest of the market. Most analysts saw it as a breakout opportunity, but I didn't. I spent 2 sleepless nights reviewing every number, every appendix in the report, until I discovered the truth. Those companies were inflating their revenues through internal transactions, essentially buying their own products to fake sales. If we didn't pull out in time, we would lose at least $32 million of our clients' funds. I couldn't stay silent. That Monday morning, I walked into the executive boardroom with a 42-page analysis and a risk simulation model. No one interrupted me while I spoke. The CFO was silent for a few seconds before turning to the CEO and saying, "She just saved the company." Within 3 days, the entire portfolio was restructured according to my proposal, and 6 months later, not only had we avoided a major loss, but the firm also reported 11.4% growth, the highest in 7 years. I was promoted to chief investment strategist. But I didn't stop. I started using my free time to develop a risk assessment system based on market behavior, integrating factors like consumer psychology, social media trends, and global political changes. It was the kind of thing the industry always labeled as unquantifiable. I called it PRISM. At first, PRISM was a personal project. But after it accurately predicted price fluctuations in 3 major stock groups before key events, upper management took notice. 1 year later, the system was officially integrated into the firm's core strategy, helping Bradley and Lane outperform 2 of its top industry competitors. I still remember the day I was called into the boardroom. CEO Richard Langley smiled once everyone was seated. "Stephanie," he said, "we're creating an entirely new position, Director of Investment Strategy, and no one deserves it more than you." I could barely breathe. Just 4 years earlier, I'd been told that maybe I should work for a while and see what I wanted to do afterward. That role wasn't just a title, it was proof of everything I had overcome, from being the forgotten daughter of my family to sitting at the head of a multi-million-dollar firm. That night, I didn't celebrate with champagne or a party. I went to my grandparents' house, a simple red brick home filled with affection. Grandma Helen was cooking, and Grandpa Arthur was making tea. I placed the appointment letter on the table. They looked at each other and smiled. "Our little Stephanie," Grandpa said, now leading the way. I looked at both of them, especially my grandmother, the first person who believed that I didn't need to be exceptional to have worth. For the first time, I didn't need anyone's approval. I had already proven it to myself, with quiet determination, relentless effort, and unshakable faith. After accepting the position of Director of Investment Strategy at Bradley and Lane, I knew I needed to mark the occasion, not with ostentation, but with a small and warm gathering for those who had supported me, my grandparents, a few close friends, and a few trusted colleagues. When I mentioned the idea to my mother, she immediately offered, "Why don't we do it at home? It'll be more intimate. The family will be there too." I hesitated, but she insisted. "You just need to send me the money for catering and decorations. I'll take care of the guest list and everything else." I wasn't entirely sure, but I thought that after so many years, maybe this would be our chance to start over. I transferred $3,500 and didn't ask anything else. 1 week later, when I arrived at the old house in Salem, the place where the shadow of Claire had grown, I never expected to walk in and find a perfectly staged performance. The house was far more luxurious than I imagined. White orchids covered the dining tables, soft gold ribbons climbed the staircase, and the scent of gourmet dishes filled the air. I saw my grandparents near a small bar, chatting with some relatives. Claire came down the stairs in a striking red satin dress, her face flawlessly made up. At her side was a tall, elegant man I didn't recognize. People started to gather, and just as I raised my glass to speak, my mother suddenly stood up, beaming. "Dear family," she announced, "today we're not just here to reunite, but to celebrate something truly special. Claire and her boyfriend Andrew are officially engaged." Cheers and applause filled the room. I stood frozen. I looked at my mother, gone. Her eyes passed over me as if I were just another guest at the party I had paid for. I stepped forward to speak, but my father blocked my path and grabbed my wrist like a full stop. "Don't ruin this," he murmured, his voice sharp as steel. "If you cause a scene, don't expect anything more from this family." No contact. No inheritance. Nothing. I pulled his hand off mine and took a deep breath. Part of me wanted to leave and let them carry on with their show. But another part, the one that had lived too long in the shadows, refused to stay silent. I returned to the center of the room, raised my champagne glass, and said, "Excuse me, may I speak for a moment?" All eyes turned to me. Claire stopped mid-step. My mother's brow furrowed. This celebration today, I began in a calm but firm voice, was planned to commemorate an important milestone in my life. Recently, I was appointed Director of Investment Strategy at Bradley & Lane, a major financial firm in Seattle. I paused, observing the reactions around me. I was the one who sent the money for this event. My mother agreed to organize it and never once mentioned that it would be turned into an engagement party. A murmur rippled through the room. My grandparents remained motionless, surprised. "I don't oppose Claire's engagement," I continued. "What I cannot stay silent about is how my own family tried to erase me from my own celebration, just as they did throughout my entire childhood." Andrew turned to Claire, confused. "You told me this was just a family gathering." Claire's face turned crimson. "Andrew, I just wanted to wait for the right moment. Using your sister's money to stage your big reveal," he cut in, his voice serious. "I came expecting to feel welcomed, not to see someone excluded from her own event." He set down his glass and walked out. Claire ran after him, in vain. The room fell into a suffocating silence. My father stood up, his face red with rage. "You should know your place, Stephanie. This house still." I interrupted him. "This is a place built on favoritism. It's no longer a home." I looked at my grandparents. They were still there, stunned. Grandma Helen's eyes were glistening, and Grandpa Arthur took my hand as I passed by. "I don't need the rest of this family to know who I am." I walked out the door, the same one I had once left in silence, but this time with my head held high. Andrew left without saying a word, leaving Claire with a lost look. She reached the porch, but the car door shut before she could say anything. The taillights of the Mercedes disappeared among the trees, leaving the house in a silence that had once been filled with laughter. Claire came back in, her tears quickly turning to fury. "You've always envied me. You can't stand to see me happy, so you destroy everything." I stood still, not answering. For the first time, it didn't hurt. I just felt tired of the same old speech. "Claire," said Grandma Helen, her voice calm but firm, "you made your choices. Don't blame your sister." My mother stepped forward, her face pale with rage and shame. "Stephanie, who do you think you are to humiliate your sister like this in front of the family?" "It's not about what I think I am," I replied softly. "I just told the truth, and I've been silent for too long." My father took my mother's hand, trying to restrain her, but his eyes were burning. "If you walk out that door today," he said in a cold tone, "you will no longer be part of this family. Don't expect an inheritance. Don't call us again. To us, you never existed." I was about to respond when Grandpa Arthur, who had observed the entire evening in silence, stepped forward. His voice rang through the room like a bronze bell. "David, if you're going to exclude Stephanie from the family, it's time to clarify a few things." Grandma Helen took his hand and stepped up beside him. My mother looked at them, as if sensing something was coming. "We updated our will 3 months ago," said Grandma, calmly. "The entire estate, the house, the savings, and the investment shares, will go entirely to Stephanie." My mother let out a gasp of shock. "You know what? We've seen enough," said Grandpa Arthur. "Enough to know who lives with real values, and who only lives being spoiled. Claire is my biological daughter," my mother almost shouted. "Why her?" she demanded. "Because she's the only one in this family who never asked for anything, never complained, and never stepped on others to rise," Grandma Helen replied, her voice slightly trembling but her gaze steady. "We don't reward favoritism or falseness." Claire burst into tears, her pride crumbling. She ran up the stairs, the red dress trailing behind her like a bleeding brushstroke in a collapsing painting. My mother stood frozen in the middle of the room, her lips trembling. My father turned away in silence. I picked up my purse, looking at my grandparents, my heart close to bursting. I didn't ask for any of this. I don't need the inheritance. We know, Grandpa Arthur said, smiling. And that's precisely why you deserve it more than anyone. I looked around the house, once a wound, now a stage where the truth had finally come to light. Relatives slowly stood up, avoiding my gaze, as if waking from a mistaken dream. No one stopped me as I walked out. I crossed into the spring night, the breeze brushing my cheeks with the familiar scent of blooming apple trees. Behind me, I heard the door close, not a slam, but the end of a chapter that had lasted for years of resignation. On the way to my grandparents' house, Grandma Helen took my hand gently. You no longer have to fight to prove anything, Stephanie, she said. Now, you just get to be. I looked at her, eyes full of tears. I had never felt such peace. It wasn't about the money or the recognition, but because, for the first time, I had chosen myself instead of chasing approval from those who never truly wanted to accept me. 3 years have passed since that night, the night I walked out of my parents' house for the last time, carrying with me the truth, the pain, and the strength I hadn't known I possessed. I haven't looked back. I haven't felt the need. In these 3 years, I've devoted myself completely to my work at Bradley and Lane. Every morning before dawn, every silent night on the 19th floor, I was there, refining the strategy, adjusting the Prism algorithm, listening to the market, and leading my team through moments that once would have seemed impossible. When the current CEO, Richard Langley, announced his retirement, no one expected him to name me as his successor. For me, it wasn't luck, it was the result of all my effort, every sleepless night, and every tough decision. The day I was officially named CEO of Bradley and Lane Capital, I was 30 years old, the youngest CEO in the firm's more than 60-year history. The announcement took place in the main hall, with camera flashes everywhere and every seat filled with shareholders. I stood on that stage not to impress, but to represent a new generation, one that doesn't need to be born into privilege to forge its own path. After the speech, I pulled out my phone and called my grandparents. I did it, I whispered, my voice trembling with emotion. Grandpa Arthur laughed on the other end, and Grandma Helen repeated words I will never forget. You've always been worthy, Stephanie, from the very first day. Meanwhile, about 60 kilometers away, in the city of Salem where I grew up, things hadn't changed much. Claire was now 27 years old. She didn't wear an engagement ring and didn't have a stable job. After Andrew left that night, her life spiraled through a series of failed attempts. She dropped out of a fashion program, saying it was too much pressure. She tried becoming a content creator, but gave up because no one gets my style. In the end, she moved back in with our parents, in the very same room that was once taken from me. I haven't spoken to my parents since that night. Sometimes, my grandparents mention that they ask about me through acquaintances, but I no longer care. I've learned that not all relationships are worth keeping, especially when they're built on denial and selfishness. Every Sunday afternoon, I go have dinner with my grandparents. We toast bread and flip through old photo albums I thought I'd never see again. Grandma Helen still tells little stories from my childhood, and Grandpa Arthur pretends not to remember them so that I have to retell every detail. One day, I asked if they regretted leaving everything in my name. We didn't do it for the monetary value, Grandma replied. We left it to the one who understands the value of choosing integrity over convenience, of staying silent when it matters, and speaking up when it counts. I smiled because I realized that was the greatest inheritance they gave me, not the assets, but their trust. One spring afternoon, after a global strategy meeting, I walked out of the office and saw someone waiting in the main lobby. I closed my eyes and recognized Claire. She looked thinner, her gaze uncertain, but she wore her usual style, designer coat and flawless heels. I'm not here to apologize, she blurted immediately, as if shielding herself. I just wanted to know how you've done so well without anyone pushing you. I looked at her, not with anger, not with pity, because there was a time when I had nothing, Claire. And that's when I learned to stand on my own. That's something you never had to do. Claire looked at me for a moment. She didn't say anything else, and then she left. I don't know if she'll ever change. But I know I'll never again be the sister who always yielded, always stayed silent, and sacrificed her voice for the sake of keeping peace. I returned to my office, where my team was waiting to keep building something new together. And in that moment, I knew that no matter where the road begins, as long as you don't abandon yourself, the destination will always be worth it. My story isn't just about overcoming favoritism in a family. It's a testament to the power of perseverance and inner strength. Once, I was ignored, pushed aside in my own celebration, but I chose to rise, not out of resentment, but for truth and dignity. Today, I no longer seek the approval of those who once denied it to me. Because I've found my place, among those who truly believe in me. And more importantly, I've learned to believe in myself.